Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. We're really pleased to have you here. I'm Lisa Mattias, Vice President, Capacity Building and Innovation at the Information and Communications Technology Council, or ICTC for short. ICTC is a neutral, not for profit national center of expertise focused on advancing Canada's digital economy by supporting businesses and business leaders like yourselves with the tools, skills, talent, and support they need for innovation and competitiveness. With funding from the Government of Canada, our goal for over 30 years has been to help Canadians use technology to drive economic growth. Today, we're continuing our online generative AI training series with a session on safeguarding your business in a digital era. We're in an era of rapid digital transformation, making safeguarding your business against cybersecurity threats more critical than ever. Through this training initiative, we're committed to empowering Canadian businesses with the skills needed to navigate AI-driven opportunities securely. As AI reshapes industries, it also introduces new security risks, from data breaches to compliance challenges. This session is designed to equip you with the essential knowledge and strategies to protect your organization. You'll learn about the cybersecurity risks associated with AI, data governance, and compliance frameworks, along with best practices for building resilient digital systems. Now, I'm pleased to introduce you to our expert trainer, Sunny Wang, National Co-Pilot Lead for Microsoft Canada, who will guide us through today's session.
Hello, everybody. My name is Sunny. I'm part of the Microsoft Canada team, and I'm so excited to be presenting to you this session called Generative AI for Business Leaders, Safeguarding Your Business in the Digital Era. Before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. So many of you have joined us previously for sessions about generative AI, in particular for small to medium businesses. A big part of my role in Canada is actually guiding SMBs and SME organizations, as well as government organizations, through the rapid rise of AI. But we are here to ground you in a little bit more of what that means, as well as some actual techniques, things to think about in terms of responsible AI, AI assessments, deployment, data security, and so forth. So we'll cover all of that today. There's a lot of content to be had. Couple of housekeeping items. So we know that the rapid rise of AI advancements makes skilling more important. Skilling is really the human part of AI. It's the human part of all of your businesses, what you do every single day, the people that you work with, and that's never really going to go away. In a more recent study that we did in partnership with IDC, we actually found that 60% of small to medium businesses, and this is a global statistic, but very similar in Canada, struggle with overcoming an AI skills gap. And so before you even think about how can AI come into play in my business, you have to start to think about who are the people that you employ, including yourselves. What are the skills that they need, both to make AI work for them, as well as to protect your business from the risks? And then what are the things you're going to do to actually bridge that gap? And so that's something that is super important to call out. Skills are at the core of unlocking the power of AI, but skills are also at the core of protecting your business and ensuring that when users are leveraging these tools, these very, very powerful tools, they can do so responsibly in a way that adheres to your own business mission and values, and in a way that, again, is secure for protecting the data and the things that you actually do every single day. And so that's really the gist of what we're going to talk about today. The group that I'm a part of and that I'm supporting is called Microsoft's AI Skills for Social Impact. And so this is just a quick slide about what this organization does. Our mandate is to really expand the opportunity of AI across everybody around the world, including in Canada, through digital learning and skilling initiatives. And so on the right-hand side, you can see a bit more about how we work and where we actually operate within Canada. But in terms of the context of today, we're actually going to focus on a couple of skilling pieces within that umbrella topic of safeguarding your business. So number one, we're going to talk about data governance and compliance in terms of protecting your organizational data from risks associated with AI. When I talk with SMBs and SMEs in my day-to-day job, this is by and far the number one concern that I hear when it comes to how can I get AI into the door safely? How do I make sure that people are using it properly? And how do I protect my business while still reaping the rewards? So that's going to be number one. Number two is we're going to learn best practices for building more resilient technology systems. Many of you operate primarily either through technology or in person day to day with physical assets, but you all have some aspect of technology within your business today. So we'll talk about how you can keep that safe. And then the third thing is we're going to talk about frameworks and assessments that Microsoft has created that you can definitely leverage for yourselves on how to implement AI ethically, how to develop AI if you are a business that's in the practice of doing so or thinking about it, and probably most importantly, how to actually evaluate AI vendors in the market. There's so many of them for all of your various use cases and for your industry, and so how do you actually evaluate that to be able to make the best choice for yourselves? Couple of core concepts, four core things to remember. I'll come back to this every single couple of minutes, but change is a people process. We need to, number one, think about the human aspect first. We need to meet your people where they are in terms of skills, in terms of responsible AI. Number three, we need to leverage our own assessments and readiness tools to tailor your own approach. Every business will be different. Every SMB, SME organization in Canada has slightly different needs, and so we need to accommodate for that. And then finally, and probably the most important thing, is it's about progression, not perfection. You can never have it perfect on the first day, the first initiative, but it's a learning process that we go through together. And that's been really important for a lot of organizational leaders who are thinking about jumping headfirst into the AI shift. And so we'll come back to this, but I want you to think about this when it comes to your own strategy. So Microsoft's approach to AI is actually something that is very important to talk about because I think a lot of businesses, big and small, can learn from the things that we've done and the investments that we've put into this field of AI. Brad Smith is our vice chair and president of Microsoft, and he talks a lot about how, as a company, we're committed to bringing technology and people together to realize the promises in a responsible manner. You can see here he talks a lot about security. He talks a lot about skilling, investments to help people, industry, and society. And where that comes in is all throughout our approach, which I'll get to in a couple moments within the context of this presentation. So with that, let's start to talk about and ground ourselves in some key generative AI concepts and definitions. For those of you who know a lot about AI, this might be a bit of a refresher. But before I talk about how to govern AI and be responsible, I first need to talk about the history of where this came out and where we started. Artificial intelligence as a field has actually been around for a very long time. And in fact, a lot of the more pioneering work was actually done in Canada. And so we have a lot to be proud of as a country when it comes to the research, the amount of intellectual capital, the products that are being built every single day in our country. But in the 1950s, this is when the term artificial intelligence was first coined. The idea that humans could be one day, or machines could one day be more intelligent than humans has not been, I think, something new. We see that in books and sci-fi movies for a very, very long time. But in the 1950s, AI became a field of computer science that sought to make machines as intelligent, if not more intelligent than humans. And so that's the first step. Then we got the subset of machine learning, which is something that many of your businesses leverage. You look at a massive amount of data and learn to make predictions and analysis on top of that. And then in 2017, it was actually a team at the University of Toronto, so Canadian team, that started to understand this idea of deep learning. So it's about creating a semantic understanding of all of the words and knowledge of that data and creating also distances. So, for example, different words have different meanings and different distances in our language, and mapping that out in terms of a graph that then allows the machines to do something called deep learning using neural networks to process that data and start to make predictive decisions on, for example, writing a poem or writing a piece of music. And so that was a pretty groundbreaking piece of our AI journey. And of course, that brings us to where we are today, which is in the generative AI era. Gen AI, which is what I'm really talking about, is the big part of this presentation, is a type of AI that has taken the world by storm. But I think more than that, the promises of it are so immense because it leverages new techniques through language models, which is again fed by a large data set of language, text, media, audio, code, etc., that is able to generate and produce output that could be anything from, you can see at the bottom, language translation for folks to gain access to services. It could be data tools. It could be creating books and writing movies and so forth. It can do a whole lot of things. And so this is really the piece of AI where we are at today. But of course, it also brings a lot of perils as well. Here are a couple of the highest risks when it comes to AI for Canadian small to medium businesses or small to medium enterprises today. A lot of these concepts I won't spend too much time on, but at a high level, we know that generative AI isn't 100% accurate. And so, in our research and in our own day to day use, we understand that when you leverage generative AI tools and bring it into the business, you have to go in clear eyed about the types of things that it is also capable of doing. For example, having hallucinations sometimes, or having prompts that are ungrounded in business content, meaning that you can't always trust the responses. That's been something that we've heard. Um, Artificial intelligence systems are subject to jailbreaks, which is really a technique in which you go in and you essentially reconstruct or re-engineer the core instructions, the system prompts of the generative AI. And so if the tool was explicitly told to, let's say, not provide information about creating chemical weapons, jailbreaks are techniques that allow you to re-engineer those instructions and allow it to then output those things. This is super critical for businesses because you care a lot about what sort of outputs you have, as well as what sort of behavior is not within safe use. And so we'll talk about that later on as well. In terms of harmful code, it can also generate code that can hack into different businesses. And so there's a whole lot of risks that you need to be aware of. And these are just some of the reasons why in Canada, our trust in AI is actually the lowest amongst the G7. In 2024, StatsCan produced this report where it looked at, generally speaking, how are Canadians feeling about AI. But according to the rest of the world, about 54% of the rest of the world has said that we do trust AI and the promises that it can provide. In Canada, this is much lower. And I think this is very much a warning call, as well as a realization for us that there's a lot of work that we need to do as business leaders to teach our employees of what AI is, but also to educate them on how to use it properly, as well as the benefits of it, so that we can start to match up to the rest of the world in terms of these capabilities. What are we doing in Canada? There is a lot of literature out there if you're interested in what the government's approach is when it comes to generative AI. And so I've provided two core examples of resources for you to take a look at. And you can go ahead and click on that link and get access to those essential guide on generative AI published by the Government of Canada. In the government's context, they actually published a report more so on use of generative AI within the public sector. But I think that these core FASTER principles are actually applicable for institutions and organizations at large. And so what they have gone and said is that in the guide to deploy Gen AI, there's a couple of key principles when it comes to how you want to think about it. You need to think about fairness, so how these tools can amplify bias potentially. You need to think about accountability, security of the tools, transparency. So, how are they producing outputs? How do users understand what is being outputted and what is coming out of those tools? Education, which is why we're here today, is really the core of it all. And then relevancy when it comes to decision making from these tools. We call this the FASTER principle. And the FASTER principle is something that a lot of my customers in the small to medium business space have actually adapted for their own responsible AI charters. And that's something that you write as a leadership team, you present to your employees, and you talk about these principles in terms of both the tools you're going to be procuring today, but also how your users should be using those tools. And so all of that is going to be super, super critical when it comes down to how you use generative AI. On the risk side, the Center for Cybersecurity in Canada has also produced a series of guidelines for IT teams within small to medium businesses on how to minimize risks of AI, both internally within your organization and externally. And so let me explain. We're going to get more into this in the later sections, but there's always two different types of risks when it comes to using AI. You have the risks of how your users will use it and what they may do. And then you have your risks from external forces or external bad actors who may be leveraging these tools to break into your system, to infiltrate your data. And both are very, very highly of concern within the Canadian context. And so what are some key principles here? First of all, you need to make sure you train your employees. And so we talk a lot about at Microsoft how to best educate employees on prompting using generative AI, including providing examples of responsible and irresponsible use. What does that actually look like? You can also think about develop AI usage policies. And these are the charters that I talked about earlier to ensure oversight and avoid compromises and make sure that, again, people are actually following trustworthy and ethical behavior when they're given access to these powerful tools. From an external perspective, security fundamentals like MFA, multi-factor authentication, requiring a user to access a code on their phone, verify their identity before they access these tools, is actually a very good step for stopping security risks from the external from coming in. And so even if a state actor or a bad actor were to potentially access your systems, they can't do that because they would kick off an authentication ring to a real person, and then that would then stop the process. And so this is something that we know well, but super important, especially now in the era of AI. We also need to make sure that we keep our security up to speed. And so, are you thinking about security patches? Are you protecting and upgrading to the most recent versions of your software? And also, are you updating your data governance policies? So, think of things like retention policies, sensitivity labels, deletion, and I'll talk more about that later. Are you keeping that updated now that you are providing your data access or AI tools access to your data? I think, again, this has been super top of mind for a lot of my customers. And then last of all, stay informed. Make sure you are adopting and auditing your AI tools only from the reputable security-focused vendors in Canada. Make sure that their terms of service say that they are not training on you, they are not going to be exposing your data, and that you understand what is happening to your information when you actually purchase these tools. These are all risks that as business leaders you need to consider. And so the website Center for Cybersecurity has a lot of really excellent guidance. This is just a small sliver of what is possible when it comes to these capabilities. And so let's talk about responsible AI, what it is, and how Microsoft actually thinks about it. Microsoft's own journey when it comes to responsible AI also didn't start on day one. It was definitely a journey that evolved as the technology evolved, which is something that we advise a lot of small to medium business leaders to also think about as well. And so in 2018, we actually had the first set of AI principles adopted, and I'll show you that in a moment. In 2019, we actually developed what we call the Office of Responsible AI. You can think of this as a center of excellence or a V team within our company that is solely focused on use cases, evaluations, risk assessments. And a lot of small to medium businesses that I've talked to have also started to think about this center of excellence strategy when it comes to new technologies, especially ones as powerful as AI. And so that was set in place in around 2019. In 2022, we developed an updated version of our responsible AI standards, which still actually lives today. And in 2023 and forward, we started partnering with organizations like the US White House, like the Government of Canada, to be able to make changes to our actual product in accordance to a lot of these technology and updates. And so our governance when it comes to the structure looks something like this. So you have our board, our leadership, and then this V team, Responsible AI, Office Responsible AI, who is within our company looking at things like researching cutting edge advancements and what's new in the literature. They're looking at public policy advice, and they're also looking at building it into our own products from a process or development perspective. And so for a lot of small to medium businesses in Canada, you would probably think about a similar approach. You have your board, you have your executive leadership, you have a center of excellence or a V team that is in charge of AI. And that V team is then presented with a number of things that are applicable, whether it be through research, testing, initial POCs, or even actually implementing these tools into your business. I think the structure very much is going to be the same, whether it be for a big company like ourselves or a smaller company like yourselves in Canada. Our AI principles that I referenced earlier are a combination of these core capabilities. So fairness, reliability and safety, privacy and security, the need for inclusion, which is actually something unique to ourselves, transparency and accountability. And what's interesting is that if you think about these six in context of the six earlier principles that I presented about the Government of Canada, you actually notice that there's a lot of overlap. The Government of Canada also talks about the need for fairness, the need for reliability, the need for transparency, and so forth, and privacy. And so our principles overlap quite a bit. And I think that's also for a reason. But this is to ground you in what's most important when you're looking at vendors who are providing and building AI solutions. They need to have a commitment to many of these key pieces so that their tools are then keeping you safe when you, as a customer, are using it. A quick anatomy of our responsible AI standards. These are four core questions that we ask ourselves when it comes to building AI and deploying AI. And I think these should also be questions that you also ask yourselves in your business when it comes to the what and the why behind what AI is going to be. And so, what sort of values, enduring values, guide our work when it comes to AI? Think about that in the context of your business. What are the outcomes we need to secure? It might be business outcomes, KPIs, metrics, time saved, efficiency. What are those things that we're actually looking to do? Requirements, what are the steps we need to take to secure these goals? And so, if preserving human rights and safety is an enduring value of this work, what are the things as a leadership team we're actually going to put in place, be it an AI charter, be it training, be it different standards? How are we actually going to make sure that we take steps towards those goals? And then, last of all, at the very end, do we think about the tools? And so, what technology, what types of tools, be it Microsoft Copilot or others, can actually help us meet these requirements? At the bottom of this slide, you will have a link that will be sent in the chat of this presentation. You can click on it and take a look at our responsible standards to better understand how we actually think about this in more depth. And so, here is an example. You may not be aware of this today, but in Canada, Microsoft has a product called Microsoft Copilot Chat, or M365 Copilot Chat. This is actually a free tool available on the web for all SMBs in Canada with a Microsoft subscription. And so, as long as you have Office, you have one of our eligible licenses, you can actually access this interface today by going to m365copilot.com. And so, please feel free to do that. What are some things we've done in the product that actually adhere to our standards? Well, you can see that we've intentionally made it so that your data is not being used to train the models. Transparency, security is there on day one. Even this free interface that all SMB leaders and users can leverage today is actually built with our requirements for responsible AI at the center. And so nobody can view your access on your data, right? So no eyes on access, that security piece. Your chat history is not saved. Your data is not used to train the model. And we provide enterprise protection around the interface so that whatever you put in is not going to feed, let's say, the OpenAI models, or it's not going to the internet for anybody to find. These are all really core pieces when it comes to our own products. So again, us living our principles when it comes to product building. In addition to that, so in addition to our responsible AI standards, Microsoft also thinks a lot about security at design. And so, what does that actually mean? These are some core security and privacy commitments that we've made to our customers. And remember, when you're thinking about vendors and what to evaluate, I would think about these principles when it comes to picking and choosing the right tools to use. And so our commitments as a company in Canada is that, first of all, your data is secure and protected by design. We keep your data private. We don't share your data. We don't train on your data, more importantly, and that you are in control. We also provide, through some of our security suite, the ability to manage policies based off of your needs. And so if you decide that a certain amount of content should never be exposed to AI because of security, you can actually do so. And I can teach you how to do that at a later point in this presentation. And so all of that is going to be super important. And let me provide you an actual example. When you leverage our tool like Microsoft Copilot, you can see that at the very bottom right-hand side of the screen, there is a little green shield that activates when you log in to your Copilot. This kicks in something called enterprise data protection. Enterprise data protection, all of the principles that I talked about earlier, we don't train on your data, nothing is saved, we don't send your information over to the internet, that all of that is going to be possible. And so this is something, again, that provides that context of how we actually live our values. And if you would like to get a little bit more detailed, so let's say you work in healthcare, or you really wanted to scrutinize what enterprise data protection means, what secure AI means, this is a strong list of all of the different GDPR, ISO, different constructs that we adhere to and policies that we apply our technology to so that our actual tools will be protected and will protect you. And so I would say any security vendor, any Microsoft AI vendor, or AI vendor in general in Canada, should provide these commitments and be thinking about these things. But as a customer, it is your job to go through and do a bit of that due diligence to ensure that Does the organization respect ISO? Is it GDPR supported? Is there a privacy addendum or product terms that mean that your users, when they use these tools, are protected? Microsoft provides that. I would say the same level of concreteness needs to also be provided by all of your other vendors. And so this is again an example of what good looks like when it comes to vendors that actually do the work of protecting you and preserving your data. So now that you know a bit more of how to evaluate your vendors, let's talk about how you can mitigate risks within your own environment when it comes to AI. One of the tools that our Office of Responsible AI has produced is actually a rulebook or a framework for identifying what we call sensitive uses within an organization. So, what's a sensitive use? Sensitive uses and restricted uses of AI are potential use cases in which it could have, let's say, a consequential impact on life, on physical or psychological autonomy and harm of a person. So, more of those extreme use cases in which AI can actually be used not just for benefit, but in this case for harm. All technologies are double edged. And so we need to make sure that we do our legwork to understand, as I bring AI to my organization, what are those sensitive uses or restricted uses that we can flag, we can mitigate through policy and through rules and training, and that we can actually keep an eye on so that those examples that you can see on this slide are never going to come into play into our organizations. The way you can do that is through something called the Responsible AI Impact Assessment. The Government of Canada has something called the Privacy Impact Assessment, which is very similar, but it looks specifically at the data security and privacy aspects of AI. Our Microsoft Impact Assessment is a little bit more holistic. And so you can take advantage of this. You can feel free to look at other responsible AI impact assessments available on the web. But at a high level, what an impact assessment does, it's an exercise or a charter for leadership in SMBs to understand what is the impact of bringing in an AI system or AI tools on the people that you work with, on the customers or organizations that you partner with, and on the society in which you operate, which in this case would be the Canadian market. How can you explore intended uses, stakeholders, potential harms? These are all things that the impact assessment allows you to do. And so why don't we start with an example? For example, maybe you are a healthcare organization in Canada that is thinking about bringing in an AI system to help optimize your resourcing. Healthcare is one of these industries that is very sensitive because of the nature of the patient data that you're dealing with, the, I think, high intensity of the work that's required. And so this is a perfect example, but you can think of this in terms of case studies for your own business and what you actually do as well. And so that's the context here. You can see that it's looking at bed allocation, staff scheduling. That's what this AI software is intended to do. But what I want you to think about through the impact assessment is what you see on the very right-hand side. What are all of the possible uses, the ways in which this system could be used for both good and for harm? For example, maybe hospital staff can break into this system at the front end and use it to manipulate shifts. That would output shifts that people would not be able to question because it was AI generated, right? So these are all starting to be examples that you need to think through. And then from there, you can categorize those risks on a spectrum of, are those positive, are those negative, intended, unsupported, or actually misuse? And then that will then inform your overall AI policy as well as your training that can be tailored towards those use cases. And so with all of this, you can start to see how this impact assessment can really make a big difference in terms of your deployment. And if you don't know where to start, this is a really great template. We'll provide the links to this in the chat of the RAI impact assessment, as well as our HAX, our HAX workbook of human AI interaction. And these are all tools you can start to play with today as you start to make sense of your strategy. The final resource I'll provide in this specific section is that we'll also link you this in the chat. The EU AI Act is a piece of legislation passed by the European Union that is probably by far the world's most advanced and most thorough responsible AI guide when it comes to AI safety, responsible AI use and deployment. And so if you're curious about what the top golden standard looks like, I would go and read on the EU AI Act. But Microsoft has also published a set of AI literacy templates that inform on, first of all, what are the components of the EU AI Act, what using AI responsibly actually means, and how you can start to invest in guardrails, in commitments, in policy as a business leader to actually get deeper into the space. And so our AI literacy guide is where you would want to start when it comes to legislation. Again, this is more European specific, but a lot of Canadian legislation is going to mirror of what's being talked about by the EU AI Act. And so I would start here as your guide for understanding regulations in the context of your business. So now that we've gotten this far, another piece of content that I'd like to go through is what it means to actually safeguard your data using very tactical and specific techniques. We've covered so far the use of responsible AI, the building of policies, the building of training, and understanding legislation, as well as techniques that were passed down from the Government of Canada, as well as from entities like the European Union. But this section of the presentation is very tactical and geared towards SMBs and your own data governance journeys in the context of your own data. And so, first of all, what are the components of a strong governance program? Every organization adopting AI needs to think about the implications that it has on the data that you use and the decisions that you actually make as a business. And so, for a lot of organizations, as you think about data governance in the context of AI or even an AI governance program, thinking about policies. So, what is good use versus misuse, thinking about data quality. So, how do you make sure the inputs are strong so that the outputs are also good? Thinking about monitoring. So, once you've created those policies, how are people going to follow it? How are you going to report back to the board, to the street, or to your leadership on what's actually happening? And then the last piece is a little bit more long term, but what is the long term play here? Are you using AI because everybody else is doing it? Or are you actually thinking strategically about the use cases, the way in which AI will make your business stronger, and making sure that you map that out in terms of ROI? These are all of the 4 things that build on our previous discussions of what AI governance or good AI governance can actually look like. If I were to map this into a plan, I won't talk through every single piece of this journey. And I will also call out that this journey is super subjective. This is Microsoft's recommended journey when it comes to starting from zero and getting to real success. But of course, you can take pieces of this journey map for yourselves, adopt as little or as much as you need, so long as you're looking at the most critical pieces when it comes to responsible AI. For example, what is, I think, definitely a showstopper you must absolutely have is that very beginning of vision and strategy. What exactly are you looking to achieve? And what does success actually look like? From there, a lot of organizations form an AI committee or a council. So that middle layer, the Office of Responsible AI, that center of excellence that's looking at these tools. And then they start thinking about how to secure your environment through data governance policies, security tools, upgrades to your current technology stack, as well as that responsible use policy that I talked about, which you can create through the impact assessment for responsible AI. And then from there, they talk about training. So how do we teach our users? How do we get them to do what we want them to do? We do rapid prototypes or POCs of the tools that we want, and then we measure success, right? So these are all key components. I would say the most important ones are vision, the security controls, training, and then the ROI monitoring, but you can absolutely take advantage of as many or as little as you need. And so this will also be provided to you, I believe, after the session, but take a look at it. Think about this in the context of your own business, because this is really a great recommended journey for how to go from 0 to 100. When it comes to data assessments and oversharing, we have a tool at Microsoft called Microsoft Purview. So take a look at that as a really great tool to get started. But we also have, I think, many other options in the market today that can do similar things. And so what Purview is essentially a data governance tool, and it runs assessments of your environment to understand what are the potential areas of exposure of data when you're leveraging AI tools like a Copilot, for example. And so why is this important? If you have confidential customer data, if you have PII data, personal identifiable information, credit cards, security and insurance numbers, and so forth, you want to make sure that AI is not being overexposed and that people don't now have access to these pieces of very confidential information that is now so much easier to search with a tool like Copilot. Purview will actually run assessment for you to better understand your estate, what is missing, what are the gaps. And so this is definitely a first step when it comes to understanding and governing your data, is really understanding where you're at today in the context of your environment. We also talk a lot in the security world about information protection. And this is just a really fancy way of saying that, are you labeling your data? Are you making sure that, again, AI is not accessing what it shouldn't have access to? Your people are not putting that information into a public source like ChatGPT, which again trains on that data. Information protection policies are your key to how to actually leverage, and implement. And so here you can see there's a spreadsheet. Flagging that as confidential means that users will not be able to share that externally or download that and put it into a Gmail, for example. You can automate and set up controls over all of these different pieces. So start thinking about what are those policies as a leadership team you need to put in place so that when your users get access to AI, they can do it comfortably. And you can also sleep at night, right? More importantly so, because you've actually done the legwork of protecting your environment. Purview makes it very easy to set up these policies, but I think, again, think about this more so as a step-by-step process. So what is the policy? In this case, it's that we want to restrict access to Copilot for these confidential project docs called Obsidian Merger. And so I've set those policies. I've applied those policies to my Microsoft environment. You can do this similarly for your other environments you have at work. And then you click on finish. This will run that policy that will analyze your environment. It'll automatically label, automatically lock down and delete certain pieces of content. This is a no-brainer when it comes to, again, protecting your data estate. And so think about this in the context of your business. And think about this in the context of your IT strategy as you start to grow and give access to AI for AI to your content. I actually have an example as well of some more pieces of, for example, where do these policies go? So for Copilot, are you looking at your Teams chats? Are your users in email or in Excel? And those are the pieces where you want to protect. And so these are all super important in terms of where to go. And so it's just more providing more examples of the things you can do. And then, of course, at the very end, as leadership, you've had your policies, you've trained your users, but how do you actually make sure that certain cases, for example, where a user is infiltrated by a malicious actor and they're starting to leverage AI to scrape data or to understand data, how do you catch those after the fact? How do you make sure that people are actually following your policies and not putting in confidential information? Purview provides a lot of audit capabilities as a leadership team to help you understand and analyze what's going on in your own environment. But I'd say taking a step back, the principle of audit and of the constant evaluation, the assessments of your environment and what's working, what isn't, is also super important. So I would think about this after the fact. So first of all, strategy, then set the policies, then train, and then finally analyzing how are we doing? Are people actually following? Do we need more training, more education? And so it's really that full cycle and loop of everything that's actually possible. And so to put all of this together, here's a great video example of all of these policies, information protection concepts in action in the context of Microsoft Copilot.
I would like to compare legal positions between two agreements, one a Microsoft template and the other a custom template. I'll use an NDA as an example. I'll use a simple prompt and ask it to compare key legal positions, asking for a table format and letting me know if only one agreement covers a specific issue. You can refine the prompt further by being more detailed about the format or spelling out specifically the legal positions you would like to have listed. However, as you can see, Copilot did a good job of selecting those on its own. You can see that the highest sensitivity label between these two documents have been automatically applied to the document we've created.
And so that really brings us to the end of the presentation. A couple of things for you to take away. I know there's a lot of content to be had, but definitely check out the links in the chat, read up about our government of Canada's policies and guidance, read up about our Microsoft policies, as well as the EU AI Act if you're interested in learning a little bit more about what responsible AI means. But if you're curious about how we approach it at Microsoft, or if you would like to use our free Microsoft Copilot tools and you need to understand how we approach responsible and ethical generative AI, our 2024 Responsible AI Transparency Report is actually a really excellent resource for you to take a look at. And so here's a QR code. We will also provide a link to this as well. But it's really an overview of all of the work we've done so far, all of the different policies and protections that we've put in place for you, as well as how we support our customers with evolving questions through things like the AI impact assessments and so forth. And so take a look at it. It's a great resource for you to grow and start to get into this journey. This series is also part of, or this video is also part of a series called Generative AI for Business Leaders. And so if you like the content of today, if you're curious about more of what AI means for your business, I would go to this website and check out more of the various sections and segments. There's going to be multiple different topics covered by Microsoft, be it what generative AI is, how to think about it responsibly, which is this session, as well as its applicability in things like HR recruiting, marketing, and sales, and so forth. So a lot of good content and goodness to come. Definitely check this out if you would like a little bit more of what you received today. And so with that, I would say to really wrap up, AI is an opportunity that provides so much goodness, but also challenges for SMBs and SMEs across the country. It's not a zero journey. I know everyone starts from somewhere, but hopefully the tools that we've talked about today give you some sense of confidence on how to begin to navigate the unprecedented questions that are being posed to all of us when it comes to AI. Take a look at the frameworks, understand responsible AI, but more importantly, make sure that you test it. It's not about perfection, it's about progress and about learning. And so with that, thanks so much for joining us today. And we're happy to have you again for one of our follow-up sessions.
Thank you for joining us today for this insightful conversation on cybersecurity and AI. And thank you so much, Sunny. We invite you to continue your learning journey by registering for the next session in this training series, AI and Data-Driven Decision Making, Harnessing the Power of Predictive Analytics, which is taking place on April 24th. I invite you to scan the QR code on your screen to register for our next session and sign up for our free AI training initiative for business leaders in collaboration with Microsoft. This initiative is helping Canadian small and medium-sized businesses such as yours gain the skills and knowledge needed to harness the benefits of generative AI to help improve productivity, streamline operations, and drive growth. We look forward to seeing you at the next session.